Senator Rose Oko Cross River North on her motivation in providing educational materials in schools in her senatorial district. In the intervention, 34 schools received educational materials comprising science equipment, textbooks, reference materials, and classroom desks, as well as teaching and learning aids. It also includes 6 blocks of 2 classrooms, estimated at 185 million naira. The move is said to be part of Senator Rose Oko's vision in reaching out to the people and deepening democracy.
Right now, I'm overwhelmed with the kind gesture that Honorable has given to us. And we pray that anywhere she is, let the good Lord keep on guiding her.
Thank God for making him to remember government and college Nigeria for his alacrity of providing all these textbooks.
I would like to say thank you to Senator Roscoe for bringing this textbook to our school. It may help us.
We promise to make adequate use of this equipment. We shall never fail ourselves and the nation.
You know, we are moving more and more into the technological age. And students from these rural areas, you know, they do not have access to lab equipment, you know. And so we cannot overemphasize the importance of these materials that we've taken to this course.
The senator urged the beneficiaries to make judicious use of the materials to enhance the standard of education in the state.
Interventions like this, especially in the education sector, and other interventions are things I'll continue to do and to continue to make for as long as I represent them. I have a passion about representing my people and rendering service, true service that you're expected to do. I did that for the 4 years I was in the House of Reps, and I'm going to do that again for the remaining 2 years that I have. Let me also say that in addition to intervention in the education sector, in terms of provision of infrastructure and instructional materials, I would also in the future, going forward, in the very near future, also look at scholarships, you know, because I'm inundated with requests for school fees.
That's the program for this week. Join us next week for another package. I am Shegun Ojelade. Bye-bye.
More than 4,600 cases recorded since the outbreak of meningitis in the country as hope rises to check the scourge.
6 days to the April 19th reopening of Abuja Airport, runway debarkation begins.
Investigation into alleged $17 billion stolen from undeclared crude oil and liquefied natural gas. House Other Committee meets international oil companies.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we focus on the widening global conflicts.
All right, now, days ago in Syria, suspected chemical weapon attack led to the death of at least 72 people, of course, which also resulted in the United States bombing suspected chemical weapon site in Syria.
And of course, in North Korea, we have seen intermittent tests of ballistic missiles, which some experts indicate would be or should be a threat to South Korea. And the U.S., of course, has also deployed some of its warships to the sea area around the Korean. In the meantime, the Russian involvement in the Crimea remains unresolved, as well as, of course, the superpower interplay in Syria involving Russia, Iran, and Turkey, and of course the United States. Plus, elsewhere around the world, particularly in Africa, attacks continuing in Egypt, in Somalia, and other terrorist spots around the continent.
Indeed. Now, Kingsley, all these, make people to predict or believe that World War III may already be on the brink. But already, of course, there are those who are saying, who believe to the contrary. It takes no more than a spark to light, of course, the fire. And currently, there are lots of sparks flying around the world. Now, even political instability in the European Union as a result of the refugee crisis is also another major cause for concern that's following terrorist attack in France and Germany.
Now, distrust and disaffection appear to have also set in the U.S.-EU relations, as the EU accuses the U.S. of, as it were, facilitating the refugee crisis with its activities in the Middle East. Of course, we have seen what's going on in Iraq, we've seen Syria and Yemen, and elsewhere where you have conflicts in the Middle East. Now, the U.S. on its own part also blames the EU for not dealing with the refugee crisis much more efficiently.
All right. That situation, of course, is heightened by a few EU leaders calling for an EU-wide army and also its own intelligence service, thereby creating the impression that the US and even NATO are not as trusted as they once were.
Well, Claire, indeed, tension has substantially risen around the world over the US and Russia-China relations, the South China Sea, as we indicated a moment ago, Ukraine and the Crimea, and multiple Middle East conflicts. North Africa, South America, extending, of course, to the lingering Iran nuclear challenge.
All right. Now, as we look at the widening global conflicts, what really are the issues? Now, is the world about to witness another Third World War? Well, the answer is blowing in the wind, and that's the subject matter for our conversation on today's edition of Good Morning Nigeria, Thursday's edition. And of course, as always, it's always good to have you with us on this program. My name is Claire Adilabu Abdulrazak. Thanks for joining us.
And of course, in addition to the questions that my colleague Claire just raised, we shall also be looking at how to effectively manage the many conflicts that have risen around the world. Do we still have, as it were, an effective policeman, or do we have an effective policing system? President Donald Trump is less than 100 days in office, but we have also seen what has happened in Syria with the launch of cruise missiles. The cruise missiles were launched, but for what purpose? And what are the likely reactions from the other side? Russia and Iran have also indicated that the U.S. Understands and knows full well its capacity to respond if it gets provoked in Syria. Again, these are the issues.
The Korean Peninsula is also...
Yeah, that's right. North Korea has said, listen, it's also capable responded. Now, the United Nations Security Council, of course, continues to exist as one of the world's primary international institution for resolving conflicts. But we don't know how the UN Security Council functions with the veto power exercised by any one of the 5 permanent members.
It played out yesterday, Kingsley. It played out yesterday.
Absolutely, it did. I mean, it's
resolution.
Well, the same way the United States also abstains from or otherwise vetoes resolutions pertaining to operations in Israel and its Palestinian neighbors. So these are the issues our experts shall be taking a look at in the course of the program later this morning. My name is Kingsley Osadolo, and I join my colleague Claire in welcoming you to this edition of the program, reaching you as always on the network service of Africa's largest television network, the NTA. Now, in the course of the program, of course, we shall have our regular complimentary segments. In the meantime, we're going over to the newsroom, and our newscaster is ready.
Good morning, and welcome to the news. I'm Olajide Bello. 4,637 suspected cases have been recorded since the outbreak of meningitis in the country. There is, however, a ray of hope as efforts to stem the outbreak are said to be yielding positive results.
We are expecting by this weekend 823,000 vaccines from the UK. They have been approved by the World Health Organization. I'm talking about quality-wise. And it's a special kind of vaccine that's called the conjugate vaccine, which has a longer protection of about 10 years than the usual vaccine which we have been using before, which is called the polysaccharide vaccine. That one gives protection for about 2 or 3 years. As of now, about 420,000 people have been vaccinated in Zamfara State, and I can tell you that we are beginning to see the plateau. That is to say that the epidemic is no more rising, it's beginning to flatten out, and we hope that's going to come down soon.
Away from health matters now, the federal government has declared Friday 14th and Monday 17th April 2017 as public holidays to mark the Good Friday and Easter celebrations. In a statement from the Ministry of Interior, the federal government enjoined Christian faithful and Nigerians in general to extend the spiritual benefits of Easter, which include love, peace and sacrifice, to their daily living. It also urged Nigerians to support President Muhammadu Buhari in his efforts to build a strong and viral nation. And to the aviation sector, ahead of the 19th April deadline for reopening of the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport Abuja runway marking, which is the last aspect of signaling the completion of works, began this Monday. To avoid speculations by the social media, online journalists took a tour on progress of work at the airport and was conducted, and this ended with a positive impression.
Vision of the runway. What remains is the part of the lightings and the markings, which is going on simultaneously.
With pockets of attacks by Boko Haram terrorists in some parts of the northeast, the Nigerian Air Force says it has launched a new air operation in the fringes of Sambisa Forest, where the terrorists are believed to have migrated to. Air Components Commander Operation Lafia Dolo Air Commodore Charles Onwas disclosed this in Yola while briefing journalists on the activities of the command in the first quarter of 2017.
A few days ago, our ISR aircraft maintained visual over BHT in Arege and track them as shown on the screen. You can see we are using the infrared, and that's why they are visual. Efficient communication of the ISR aircraft with the multinational joint task force eventually led to the dislodgement of these terrorists in a firefight. In this encounter, about 57 BHT were killed and many of them were injured, while technicals, weapons and ammo were recovered.
And away from security matters now, Northern delegates at the defunct National Conference 2014 have enjoined the people and government in the region to key into all federal government agricultural and small and medium enterprises programs as a way to curtail unemployment and boost the economy. The delegates also maintained their position against implementation of the Confab report under any guise.
We call on our security forces not to relent or rest on their oars until Boko Haram is totally flushed out of the northeastern part of our country.
What we're trying to do as the country most devastated by our attempt at development, we feel we should right now focus ourselves, minimize all the distractions, and try to focus on key areas that could uplift all of us.
Normalcy has returned to Damaturu, the Yobe State's capital, following a clash between the military and police personnel, which created panic among residents in the early hours of today. In a joint briefing, Commander 27th Task Force Brigade, Boni Yadi Brigadier General Aminu Bande, and Police Commissioner Yobe State, Sumonu Adeyemi Abdulmalik, said the situation is under control.
We're going to set board of inquiry. We are going to set military police investigation. If it warrants sending the officer for the court martial, he will go.
Yet we said what happened on both sides, and we discovered that just an issue between two people that has been generated to what we do not like.
The National Chairman of the All Progressives Congress, APC, Chief Dio Yegun, has inaugurated two-level fact-finding and reconciliation committees for Kogi and Bauchi State.
Every single one of you has been specially chosen. And this is a reflection of the seriousness with which the party takes the disputes in these two states.
The ongoing investigative hearing on the alleged $17 billion stolen from undeclared crude oil and liquefied natural gas between 2011 and 2014 suffered setback, as some of the major players in the sector could not provide explanations on the submissions they made to the House ad hoc committee investigating the matter.
Kindly take a look at the payments.
We are not in a position to tell you what those payments are because we don't have sufficient details.
Yeah.
Exploration, yes. Production, I would need to confirm if we had started commercial production at the time.
Although some confirm that, yes, this is from them, but they don't know this payment stands for what. And that's why we are investigating.
Well, that's the news for now. Claire and Kingsley will be back after this break.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
From Douglas Water Runabout to Nazi, you will not get your home till 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. But now, you can leave and get your place under 5 minutes because of this Akati road.
This is a rescue mission project. Invest in IMO. The IMO Rescue Mission. IMO must be better.
NTA Properties Investment Company Limited, a subsidiary of the Nigerian Television Authority, specializes in creating comfort in all areas of life, such as real estate investments, that is, land, houses, and office spaces, mass leasing, savings and loan scheme, household items and car loans, and so much more. Other information and entertainment services include Property in Style, a TV program that airs on the network service of the NTA, and also Property Connect, a nationwide magazine. Our priority is to bridge poverty gaps and sustain quality welfare of our clients. Partner with us and watch us help you grow. Pay us a visit today at the NTA headquarters permanent site, Area 11 Garki, Abuja, or our Lagos office at number 15 Awolowo Road, Ikoyi, Lagos. For more information, visit our website on www.ntaproperties.com.ng, or you can email us on ntapeak2000@yahoo.com. Call us on 080-2316-3474 or 080-6939-5185 or 070-3189-0555. NTA Properties Investment Company Limited, the much needed help at your doorstep.
Let's quickly update you on trending business news, but here are some teasers. Equities market holds a 3-day losing streak on last-minute rally to end Wednesday's trade on a positive note, while also the Nigerian Stock Exchange All-Share Index appreciated by 0.07%. Joy Uzo has all the details.
Hello and thanks for joining us on Business News. Naira on Tuesday slipped further to 410 Naira against the United States dollar due to apprehension in the market over supply constraints. The local currency has weakened on both the official and black markets. This is coming as directors of Bureau de Change pledged to cooperate with the Central Bank of Nigeria to help the exchange rate differentials between the official rate and the parallel market rates. The Naira closed last Friday at about 395 Naira to a dollar in the parallel market after stabilizing at 380 Naira per dollar the previous week. Uganda's central bank has cut its benchmark lending rate to 11% on Wednesday from 11.5%, saying core inflation would remain around the bank's mid-term target over the next 12 months. The cut is the 7th in succession since last April as policymakers rein in on borrowing costs from a peak of 17% reached after a surge in inflation. Bank Governor Emmanuel Tumisime said there is scope to lower rates further to support flagging economic growth momentum. The World Bank cut Kenya's economic growth forecast for this year by half a percentage point to 5.5%, citing drought, sluggish private sector credit growth, and rising prices of oil. The country is estimated to have expanded by 5.9% last year, the highest annual expansion in half a decade, but the outlook has been hit by months of dry weather that left 2.7 million people in need of food aid and dropped in annual private sector credit growth to 4% in February from 17% at the end of 2015. In its latest report on Kenyan economy, the World Bank said growth would pick up after this year, driven by the expected normalization of rainfall, a firmer global economy, a rebound in tourism, and the resolution of challenges curbing credit growth. Now, a quick look on how the equities market fared this Wednesday on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. That does it on the Business News segment. Thanks for watching.
Well, thanks a lot, Joy Uzo, for the business package. Next for us, we'll be taking a look at the front pages of some of today's newspapers.
You're welcome. If you've just joined us, you're on to Good Morning Nigeria, and this is the newspaper review segment, and we have Bayo Atobi in the house. Bayo.
Good morning, Claire.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Kingsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, Bayo, pleasure to have you join us. Claire, you want to begin?
Okay, let me quickly take the leadership newspaper this morning, and its lead report is, finally, presidency opens up on Magu. Finally, presidency opens up on Magu. That's the lead story, but it comes with about 3 riders. He remains EFCC boss despite Senate's rejection, and that's attributed to Oshibajo, that's the vice president. And EFCC raids Adoke's house in Kanu. Lost graft cases, temporary setback, legal experts, and all those stories you can find on page 5. And DSS foils Boko Haram ISIS plot to attack UK and US embassies. You can see the story just talking there on the right column. And PMB, trending at the bottom, nominates non-executive directors of CBN board. And Easter, federal government declares Friday, Monday, public holidays.
All right, let's take a look at the front page of the Daily Trust. And we'll do that by looking at the composite photographs. There are 4 photographs on the front page of Daily Trust with a caption, EFCC finds over 15 billion naira in Lagos home. You can see that the caption to that says, foreign currencies and naira notes found at House 16, Osborne Road in Ikoyi. That's in Lagos, and it took place yesterday. Details of the story can be found inside at page 5. Now, immediately below that, you have Northern delegates reject Jonathan's confab report. That's the conference, National Conference report of 2014. Details of the story can be found on page 8. And DSS foils attack on US and UK embassies. That's on page 4. And Arik Air owes creditors 387 billion naira, and that's attributed to AMCON. Details of the story can be found on page 13. Now, moving up the front page of the Daily Trust, just below the nameplate, there is this headline, Mirinda and Lucozade unsafe for consumption. That's attributed to the CPC. Details of the story can be found inside at page 4. Now, the lead story says 3 cops, that's 3 policemen and 1 soldier killed in Yobe Army and Police clash. So those are the front pages from Daily Trust this morning. Bayo.
Yeah, we have a crowded page this morning, and let's start with probably the one that the Minister of Information attempted to dispel. The Federal Executive Council met yesterday, and it was presided over by Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo. Minister of Information has clarified that President is in town. He was attending to other issues. He looked at the agenda of the day, and he thought it was light, and therefore the Vice President should preside. He said people may be wondering that is the President sick again? He said no, he is not ill. In fact, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation was with him, and they were working. And it was expected that either later yesterday or early today he will be back in the office. It may be recalled that the President returned to the country on the 10th of March, and it's exactly 1 month today, March 13, when he resumed office. Meanwhile, the report you read clear that the presidency has indicated that it did not find the indictment of Mr. Ibrahim Magu by the DSS is strong enough reason to replace him. This clarification was made by Professor Yemi Osinbajo, who said that they have clarified that the president felt that the DSS report was not meritorious enough to withdraw the nomination. He said we should commend the president for not even interfering with the DSS. The DSS came up with a report, and the man refuted it. He says that the president is satisfied with Magu's explanation. If he wanted to interfere, he could have ordered the DSS to keep quiet. And therefore, the president reserves the right to say, this is who I want. And it is also not peculiar to Nigeria, he cited. He said recently, the U.S. Senate refused to confirm Jeff Sessions as Attorney General, yet President Donald Trump went ahead and made him Attorney General. He added, the president does not necessarily need or to seek Magu's confirmation, going by Section 171 of the 1999 Constitution. And that section says the powers to appoint some persons to some category of office is by the president, and it also holds the power to remove such persons from the office, and is vested solely in the president. It may be recalled that the law that requires the Senate to confirm the EFCC chairman is actually in the EFCC Act, and it cannot be superior to the Constitution.
So will this now put to rest the, quest
by
the Senate?
I'm very curious. You recall that there is a reconciliatory committee put up by the executive and the legislature. Exactly. In fact, the part of the executive is led by the vice president, and this statement is coming from the vice president. Meanwhile,
I just wonder, you know, these are very important constitutional questions that are being raised. Of course, as you just indicated, there is a conciliation team, also headed by the Vice President, between the executive branch, that's the presidency, and the legislature, namely the National Assembly, House of Reps, and the Senate. Now, if you're having this kind of ongoing altercation, perhaps that might impede whatever conciliatory moves there could be. But, you know, if you were to extend the argument to say, yes, the powers of the president to appoint and to remove are inherent in the Constitution, then could it also be that because the president can appoint ministers, and the ministers ordinarily are supposed to undergo confirmation by the Senate, that the president can go ahead and appoint ministers?
Well,
or ambassadors, or some such other persons, you know, who ordinarily would require their nomination to be confirmed, such as the Chief Justice. And then if you say, as we have also argued, Bayo, to say that, all right, the confirmation of an EFCC chairman is to be found in the Constitution, is to be found in the EFCC Act. Well, the EFCC Act should be read in conjunction with the provisions of the Constitution. The Constitution grants validity to laws that have been validly passed. And so those laws, of course, cannot be in conflict with the provisions of the Constitution, but they must be read in conjunction with the provisions of the Constitution. If a law says, look, go for confirmation, then...
For me, I find this a very interesting development. Yes. It is good for the development of our democracy, yes, and we should not shy away from seeking constitutional interpretation from the courts, so that we can move on.
That's right. That's what they call constitutional jurisprudence. Yes. All of these issues are resolved, and then there's clarity. It's not a matter of personal ego. No, yes, it's just seeking clarity so that going forward, you know what to do.
Where to do.
That's right. All right, by the way, we're still discussing one or two subjects.
Yes, I was going to talk about the EFCC's initiative, having discovered another huge sums in Ikoyi, but there are conflicts from the reports in the newspaper. Some papers are reporting $43 million. Others are saying $38 million, 27,000 pounds, and 23 million naira. You recall that this is perhaps the fifth discovery in a spate of about 1.5 weeks. The first was about 441 million. Then there came the 250 million at Balogun Market. Then there was another 4 billion from a former candidate of being a deputy governor in Niger State. And now we have this one that has been summed up to be a total of about 41 billion. They had to bring in bankers with their machine to be able to, to count.
All right, Bayo, let's quickly take a few more papers. I think we just have less than few 3 or 4 more minutes to go. Nigerian pilot, terrorism, DSS false attack on UK-US embassies. Details of that on page 5. And you see this picture story, and Inspector General of Police, IGP Ibrahim Idris, Deputy IGP Research and Training and Planning, Valentine Tom Chukwu, and Deputy IGP Training and Development, all, of course, with the NAN's president launching Police is Your Friend in Abuja yesterday. That's the picture story there you see, of course, with the, placards there. Buhari absent at FEC meeting, or Shibajo presides. President is not sick, like Mohammed. Bayo has already spoken to this issue. Now, trending stories at the bottom. EFCC raids ex-AGF advocate's home in Kano. Senate probes alleged 30 trillion naira forex fraud by banks. And presidency declares full support for Mago. We also talked about that. Transcorp rises to a top 500 company in Africa. And the last one there, Senate won't make laws that interfere with religion. Saraki. And that's the outlook of the Nigerian pilot.
Let's take a quick look at the front page of the Punch newspaper. The Punch still also has the photograph of the hard currency haul from a home in Ikoyi, that's Osborne Foreshore Estate in Ikoyi, Lagos yesterday. But there are other headlines that we'll take a look at from the front page. Or if we could just scroll up down to see the other headlines. It says, AMCON takes over 3 more Arumemi Ikides firms. AMCON takes over 3 more Arumemi Ikides firms. Of course, that's on page 21. Arumemi Ikide, of course, is one of the major shareholders of Arik Airlines. Now, Senate panel alleges 30 trillion naira forex scam in banks and begins probe. Of course, the story that Claire read earlier, Buhari absent from FEC meeting and remains indoors, they claim it, but of course, the information minister says there's no cause for alarm. That story from the Punch is on page 9. Now, we won't replace Magu, and DSS report on meritorious. That's attributed to Vice President Oshibajo. Of course, Bayo has already talked about that, and the declaration of the holidays. Let's go very quickly now to the footer of the front page of the Punch to look at the window of other headlines that they have there. Now, 3 killed as policemen and soldiers clash in Yobe. We already read that also from the front page of Daily Trust. Daily Trust is reporting 4 deaths, but Punch is saying 3. And then 10 die, 11 injured in Kogi and Benue Road crashes. All right, Bayo.
There's already a joint committee of the army and the police to reconcile the conflict in Damaturu. Actually, a man was said to have breached the convoy of the police. He was manhandled, only to find out that he was a senior army officer. And so the soldiers came and picked up the commandant of the mobile, and they too went to go and rescue them. And then you had a gunshot. And people in Damaturu were particularly alarmed. For a long time, they've not had gunshot in Damaturu, so they thought Boko Haram was back. But a committee has been set up. The other one is...
Sorry, Bayo, I'm sorry. For the commanders to label the incident as minor, I'm particularly worried about that. People died in that, as a result of that clash.
Yes, it is certainly not minor.
It's not as minor as
the high command of the 2 institutions, the police and the army, have waded into this. I think they would take serious measures against it. Now, quickly, Consumer Protection Council has declared that 2 drinks, Mirinda and Lucozade, have benzonic acid higher than what is acceptable. However, they cleared others. But the concern here is issues related to food and drinks is the ambit of the National Agency for Food and Drug and Administration. And the other alarm is that 2 soft drinks that were exported, which is the genesis of this, was said not to be good enough for UK. So if it is not good enough for the goose in the United Kingdom, why is it good for the gander in Nigeria? And finally, there is an update in the the case of the sector commander in Rivers who cut the hair of a female subordinate.
Yeah,
he has been suspended.
That's the female hair specialist?
Yes, he has been suspended for that act. The poor lady will now, who had to probably 3 or 4 several months to grow her natural hair, or maybe was wearing a weave-on from Brazil, which will cost between 250,000 to 300,000, has lost that.
Well, that's house rent, by the way. You remember we once discussed that. This attachment or so? Yeah, well, it's attachment.
Weave-on.
Okay, weave-on.
This men are experts in this
No. The cost is I mean,
by the way, FIDA has intervened and said that it's
okay.
All right.
Okay. All right, gentlemen.
All right, Claire. Well, of course, we can't immediately see yours, but there's no scissors with any of us here. We wouldn't dare that in the first instance anyway. All right, so that does it for us.
Public holiday, Friday, and
do you
Monday.
Get to rest?
I don't know why,
we'll see you tomorrow.
But of course, Good Morning Nigeria is on tomorrow, and Ben Bayo will see you tomorrow, being Good Friday.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for being with us. All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you on Africa's largest television network, the NTA. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll look at the multiplicity of conflicts around the world and how to make sense of it all.
Change is here and it's going to stay. Change begins with you. Oh yeah, make we go. Go so let the change begin from within. Look at you, oh get roller. Change begins with you and me. Change begins with me. Change begins with me. Change begins with me.
Cadbury Bournvita now comes in an attractive new 500-gram refill pack. Simply open and reseal after use to retain the chocolatey and creamy taste. Cadbury Bournvita. Prepare to win.
It is with joy that I've received Our Excellency's gifts.
I want to say that may God continue to bless and reward her. And so, on behalf of Garki Hospital, we are grateful.
All right, we'll now bring you a background report by our correspondent Oyemi Ajayi as the foundation for our discussion on widening global conflicts.
President Roosevelt, Prime Minister Churchill, and Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek united in the war against the Empire of Japan.
In 1941, the then U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill declared that there would be no territorial aggrandizement as a result of the World War II, and the post-war international relations would be cooperative. It was also agreed that disputes between states would be resolved through peaceful negotiations and not the use or threat of force. This agreement birthed the Atlantic Charter, which eventually became the basis for the creation of the United Nations in October 24, 1945. But despite this, it cannot be concluded that there is peaceful coexistence among countries. The world has developed to be a global village, meaning every country is to some extent related or connected to one another. And this has made the decision in a part of the world to have direct, indirect, or ripple effect on other parts. This development has led to the alignment and realignment of nations along power blocks and nations that will best protect their interests, as no nation can exist in isolation. Over time, power has continued to evolve around unipolar, bipolar, and multipolar in international politics. In order to protect its relevance in Committee of Nations, countries intensify efforts at enhancing their stockpile of weapons and military equipment. This strategic positioning has set countries against themselves, but mostly in form of Cold War without any offensive engagement. However, suspicious relations between the United States, Russia, and China, as well as developments in North Korea and Syria, appear to escalate global conflicts. The consistent launching of missiles by the North Korea has brought countries on the edge of whether it would lead to World War III, judging by verbal threats of war by countries, especially the United States. Despite warnings and sanctions from the United Nations and the United States, North Korea has successfully launched short, medium, and long-range intercontinental ballistic missiles, leaving the United Nations seem like a toothless bulldog. Taking a cue from North Korea, some other countries have called the bluff of the United Nations by creating deadly weapons, even chemical weapons, just like Syria that launched a chemical weapon which killed scores of our citizens, including children. The brewing feud between US and Russia is another cause of concern to the world. Vladimir Putin, the Russian leader, recently expressed reservation over US President Donald Trump's disposition. Countries in Africa, especially in Kenya, Somalia, Mali, Sudan, Libya, Egypt, and even Nigeria, have also not been spared due to the terrorist attacks from the Islamic State of Iraq at the Levant, ISIL, Al-Shabaab group, and the Boko Haram insurgents. The question now is, what could be done to put a stop to all these global conflicts in the world? Also, how can the United Nations reclaim its pride of place as the strong world body it ought to be? One question continues to dominate. With widening global conflicts, is the world about to witness a possible Third World War?
All right, let me amplify the question put forward by, of course, our reporter Oyemi Ajayi. Is the world heading towards a World War III? Well, we're being joined in this discussion by the former Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Joe Keshi. Ambassador Keshi, it's been a while, but we're glad to have you join us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here.
And also here in the studio from the Department of International Relations and Diplomacy, Bayes University, Abuja, Dr. Samson Nzeribe. Dr. Nzeribe, good to have you.
Thank you.
All right, and then from our Just Network studios, we have joining us Brigadier General John Temblong, a familiar face on Good Morning Nigeria. He's president of the Alumni Association of the National Defense College and was pioneer commander of the Multinational Joint Task Force in the Northeast. General Temblong, I'm delighted to have you join us again today.
Thank you very much, Kingsley. Good morning, Claire. Good morning, Nigerians.
All right, and also joining us via Skype from the U.S. is the chairman of the African Political Action Committee in the U.S. is Dr. Ewa Ewa. He's joining us via Skype. Dr. Ewa Ewa, a pleasure that you are with us this morning.
Good morning.
All right, so let's begin the conversation, gentlemen, and my colleague, Lady Ambassador Joe Keshi. When you look around the world, depending on the insights that the individual has, it often leaves one these days, with a sense of foreboding, whether in the Middle East, whether in Africa, in Europe itself, that is contended with a number of issues, and then the uncertainty of a president and his presidency in less than 100 days in office. How do we begin to make sense of what's going on? Syria, elsewhere in the Middle East, and so on and so forth. North Korea, you throw that into the mix as well.
Well, my take is in direct answer to her question. I don't think we are close to a third world war. My take is that reason will prevail somewhere along the line, as it has always done within the international community, to draw back crazy leaders who want to go to war. That is not to say that we should not recognize the threats that are all over the place. As you rightly mentioned, and in your report, you have North Korea, you have the situation in Syria, you have the situation going on in Iraq, and of course here in Africa. And we should not forget Eastern Europe, Crimea also, which is under Russian control today. All this creates challenges for leaders of today to find a way of resolving these, these problems. But we must also recognize that some of these crises also were precipitated or started by some of the world powers themselves. Some of us have always maintained that the unfortunate attack or effort to remove Saddam Hussein created situations in the Middle East that still reverberate till today and has virtually destroyed sanity in the Middle East. Not too long ago also you had the Arab Spring and the rest of them. Today, Libya is unstable, more because of what was done in Libya by some of these powers also. But before then, these two countries, Libya, Syria, were really very stable. Yes, there were dictators in these countries, but they managed to hold on to their country peacefully. I think the greatest challenge we face today is how to deal with the situation in North Korea. Because it's not just a question of having a crazy fellow, and now you have a president who has sent in warships into the sea. I think when you look at the situation in North Korea, and the Americans are also aware of this, but it's not just a question of hitting North Korea. You are going to start another war that will affect, in particular, South Korea and Japan. North Korea today can successfully hit the center of Seoul very easily, and that could start its own crisis. So my hope is that the leaders of the United Nations will, all come together and see some reason why everybody must pull back. In the case of North Korea, there used to be a committee called the Six Nation, negotiating team that negotiated at some point in time with North Korea. I still believe that they need to get it back and begin to talk to the people, to the leadership of North Korea.
All right, Dr. Nzeribe, now, you've heard the views of Ambassador Joe Keshi, but let me just again sound the, observation or the review of probably a foreign observer and his views. He believes that the unleash of tomahawks in Syria may be the one of Armageddon. that, of course, the US president had already planned not just to destroy Syria, but also Russia and China in the first place?
No, I don't think, even if he planned that he can do it. You see, what is happening in the world now is just a failure of US hegemony in the world politics. When the former Soviet Union collapsed towards the end of the 80s, US emerged as the sole superpower. And that emboldened them. And there's one force pushing US foreign policy that people tend to ignore. That's the military-industrial complex that are there to gain from every conflict they push US into. They pushed them into Iraq under the pretext that there was weapons of mass destruction, which eventually there was none. Though it took years, the IEA, International Atomic Energy, said there's none, we've not seen any. The committee set up by the UN. And still they went ahead, went into Iraq. As the ambassador rightly said, Iraq is the worst for it today. The world is the worst for it. What was the crime of Gaddafi? Nobody has ever told the world Gaddafi's crime. He went there, disgraced him, murdered him, and now the same pattern is trying to repeat in Syria.
But do we know for sure that there was a chemical attack on Syria?
No. It has not been proven. It took the world how many years not to prove that of Iraq? And this strike just happened. Within 2 days, you've concluded. There has been no investigation, no international investigation, as the Russians are saying. That needs time to be proven, yes, that Assad really did this. If he did it, it was wrong, but was sending the tomahawk the answer. If you do the same thing you did in Iraq and in Libya, in Syria, seeing where the world is from the two previous adventures, I wonder what will happen in Syria and in the world. The Islamic State is already there. So if you remove Assad, who takes over? The same thing in Iraq and Libya.
I'm sorry, but from the reports, that medical experts who have actually treated some of the victims, including children, gave, there were evidence of, reactions from chemical substances.
Yes, there's no doubt that a chemical attack took place. Chemical attack took place, but by who?
Okay, so by who?
By who? That's the question. The Russians are saying yes. The Syrian bomb mistakenly hit a warehouse where these chemical weapons were stored by the ISIS rebels. That's what they said. And now you are reacting immediately. You've not allowed this thing to settle down to do a proper investigation. And you went in with your Scud missiles.
All right, Dr. Samson Zeribe, thank you very much. We'll return to you later in the conversation. Dr. Ewa, you've listened to the two guests with us here in the Abuja studios. Now, let's back up a bit and then try to also make sense of a historical sense of what is unfolding now. Former President George Bush, the son, had come up with the so-called axis of evil. North Korea is still prominent on that axis, if you will, and of course Iran is hand in glove with Russia over Syria, and then we see the continuing conflict in Iraq. And now you have a president of the U.S. who is, well, according to accounts, inexperienced in foreign policy. Under 100 days, he has ordered the launch of cruise missiles into Syria with all kinds of potential ramifications. What exactly is played out either in terms of foreign policy conceptualization by the U.S. or indeed the actions of other independent states amongst the so-called axis that George Bush, the son, had conceptualized years ago?
Thank you. I think that those are very valid questions, and everything that has been said relative to global conflict is correct. And unfortunately, our new president, you can see that his policies are evolving. For the past 24 hours, everything that has been said during the campaign has been turned around. He has now been able to bring in experts, military experts, who have started advising him on what to do, and he's listening. But if you take a look at what transpired during the campaign, more than 95% of what he said during the campaign was America first. He discounted the existence of NATO. He also said that everything that was supposed to be done relative to giving other nations assistance would be stopped because he regarded America first. Now, when you look at these types of behavior, you will see that it emboldens those individuals, the neocons, who felt that there was nothing that America can do to sustain itself unless it begins gradually to make America itself first. Do not give out possible aid to any other nations. Now, because of that, and because of the way the world looks at America as one of the best, the most powerful nation, people are beginning to withdraw. Look at what is going on in France, Brexit. Now you look at also what is going on in North Korea. Everybody wants to be a world power, but we cannot be world powers by taking advantage of what America is trying to do right now, bombing other places. Let me go back to what our ambassador has already said. There is a gradual as well as continuous power grab by Russia, by America, by France, and so many other nations. Nobody seems to realize that, yes, when you begin to expand yourself and expand NATO and exclude other nations, there is a general tendency for people to become themselves and say, look, if you cannot take care of me, I'll take care of myself. And this is one of the things that I always think about Nigeria. I will concentrate right now in advising our own leadership in Nigeria to take advantage of what we are learning today. Every country wants to be a powerful nation, taking care of its own. If Nigeria cannot, at this particular time in our history, have its own tentacles and begin gradually to say, look, we should be accountable for ourselves. We should be able to see ourselves as a world power, not only as a world power, but also we can dictate to other folks what we rely on. What is so unique about Nigeria? Nobody knows right now. Look at North Korea. They have developed their strength in terms of chemical weapons. They have one of the strongest armies. Where does Nigeria stand at this particular time? Following up on what our former ambassador said, I don't think there's going to be a third world war. It's not going to happen. Because the expansion of NATO, if it's not one of the best things that has ever happened in this world, would at least deprive a lot of nations from beginning, at least trying to be as stupid as North Korea. I can assure you one thing. Even though President Trump currently has reversed his policies for the past 24 hours, more than 90% of what he said during the campaign has been reversed. So I don't think in the next future, in the next 1 month, a lot of things are going to happen, and I don't think, and I don't believe that there will be a World War III. NATO is going to strengthen itself because of the fact that America has now begun to recognize it through what President Trump has already said yesterday and today. So I don't think there will be any World War III, but all of these nations like North Korea, Iran, and whatever, they are trying to at least contain themselves and let people understand that, yes, they can sustain themselves without dealing with America at this particular time. That may change. The only thing that I would say should be done would be, number one, for these nations to sit down, bring Russia to the table, let them understand the significance of cooperation so that these other countries that have nuclear weapons will minimize its use. And hopefully the world will be in peace. But I will tell you one more thing, sir. Nigeria should learn a lot from what is happening and begin to consolidate itself, become more accountable, and do something that the world will recognize that, yes, Nigeria should be a leader or the most leading nation in Africa, either through strength, militarily, economically, and socially. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Ewa, thank you for your contribution. Let's go to Jos Network Center and probably have a practical experience from Brigadier General John Temlong. Well, I don't know what you think. Russia has been accused of being complicit in this whole exercise, considering the fact, of course, you are saying that the base from where the chemicals, weapons were launched, were under the watch of Russian military.
Well, thank you, Claire. I think you should understand that Russia has had a long-standing relationship with Syria since the days of the Soviet Union, and it has remained an ally for that matter. And Russia really is scared about a unipolar world that was developing after the collapse of the Soviet Union, America being the only hegemon around the world. And so Russia decided to rebuild its military and its capability and capacity that it should be able to match the U.S. So over time, you found that they had been testing the waters in Crimea and even in the seas and open skies. You found that Russian bombers have been flying U.S. warships and the rest, buzzing them and the rest. Now, the situation in Syria is that the U.S. is angling for a regime change. And I think from what the other speakers have spoken, you find out that you go into a country and remove the leadership. You create a vacuum and instability in those areas. Iraq is a clear case, Libya is a clear case, and those are the ripple effects that has even happened to Nigeria here, where you have stable government, whatever they were, whether they were axis of evil or anything, a smooth transition, even in government, even in U.S. with a long history of democracy, you find that there were a lot of changes. Trump is struggling to get his feet on ground now. You've heard Dr. Ewa said he has actually reversed all his campaign promises, and the reality of governance has down on him. So the situation in Syria is quite serious because, yes, there was chemical attack. You have launched cruise missiles into the country. But what is the strategy to continue from there? And what is the end state? Is it still regime change? Or what do you want to achieve? And so U.S. is yet to articulate a clear strategy as to their involvement in Syria, just sending 59 cruise missiles in there, or what do you want to achieve? Are you going to put boots on ground? Are you going to remove Assad? If you remove him, who takes over from him? Now, if you remove even Assad, you find that the government is around Assad itself, because that has been for years, from his father to him now. And so what are you going to do? Are there people who are ready that will be able to take over from Assad? Or is it these rebels that some of them are Al-Qaeda, some of them are ISIL members that will come back and take over Syria? Will they be able to do that? Or like what they did in Iraq to disband the armed forces, disband the police? Now you have people who have 30, 40 years experience in those areas. Then you come and bring in new people to run an army. And they are the ones who went back to be in ISIL. And they are dealing with the regular armies who have less experience than them now. So it's a very messy situation we are there now in Syria. I hope it has to be handled with reason, and the strategy that will be developed will be the one that will take into consideration the overall domino effects of what will happen should you just go in for serious military strike in that area and then change the regime as it were.
All right, General John Temlong, thank you very much. We will come back to you later on in the course of this conversation. But there are a number of points that have been highlighted by the other guests. So we'll return to our Abuja studios and Ambassador Joe Keshi. As you very well know, and I'm sure the other guests, also know, as well as some of our viewers, world events are often directed by only some prominent global actors, as it were. President Donald Trump, as we now know, is reversing himself on some of his campaign promises. So his cardinal promise was America first. How do we put that in the context of what is playing out in the meantime? In Syria, he has launched Tomahawk cruise missiles, and there's no indication, what the ends are supposed to be in launching those missiles. But in doing that, it's already provoking the ire of Iran, and of course, you have the Russians also responding. Now there are warships already targeting North Korea. North Korea and South Korea are still technically in a state of war, notwithstanding the armistice that occurred 60 years ago. Can America overextend itself by precipitating wars or conflicts outside and still have America first, as Donald Trump has indicated?
This is the simplest question you've asked me. You will recall that throughout the election period that we had the pleasure of being with you all here in this studio, I kept saying that the institutions of state will moderate and change Donald Trump. And it's happening. When Donald Trump spoke to a number of African leaders in the early days of his administration, I don't know whether it was in your studio here or some other forum, I said, Donald Trump has started to read his briefs. Today, Donald Trump, for the first time, has also started to listen to his strategic and political advisors. For a president that promised America that they would win and get so tired of winning, he has not won anything since he became president. He has almost lost the battle for the immigration thing, which is now being challenged in court. He lost the effort to repeal and replace Obamacare because actually all they had was to repeal. They had nothing to replace it with. So there was nothing he has done that he has actually won. And so when this came, bear in mind that his first reaction was, I promise to mind my business. I am the president of America and not the president of the world. But overnight, he did a U-turn simply because somewhere within the strategic and political advisors saw an opportunity for him. And for a president that is 37% in terms of popularity today, since the action was taken, his popularity has gone up to about 60-something% among the Republicans. But let me put the whole thing in a context, in a way that we can understand what's going on. I'm not too sure this is a failure of American hegemony, because today America still remains, in terms of military power, the most powerful country on earth. And you could see the number of ships is actually sending out to North Korea, and no country has that capacity to do that. But we must not forget, as the general rightly pointed out, that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, one of those who felt very angry and determined to rebuild what is today Russia was Putin. And he has done that so well, rebuilt the military, and was also himself trying to assert and remind the world that Russia still remains a force to be reckoned with. And Syria, an old ally, provided him an opportunity to actually, get into the fray. And this is exactly, what we are seeing that is, that is happening. Under President Obama, look, all Obama said that, yes, we are strong, but we must deploy the military in a responsible manner, which, of course, is not what is being done here. But when you put the totality of it together, I still maintain that somewhere along the line, negotiations will begin, because if you just isolate and limit yourself to the situation in North Korea, it will be very foolish for anybody to go to war in that part of the world today, more because a number of countries will be affected, including China. The only reason why China has not pressed or taken any action against North Korea is the fear that if anything goes wrong in North Korea, a lot of that population is going to flow into China. The Koreans, South Korea, it's all equally being careful in dealing with North Korea, because it's aware of the fact that North Korea could hit even the city of Seoul itself. So at the end of the day, I still believe that this is world powers, the United States, trying to assert, Donald Trump in particular and his team, trying to remind everybody that, look, we are still the most powerful, we can do this and so on. And of course, it plays very well at home for the president. You also have Russia trying to assert itself that we are still a world leader and we must be reckoned with. So it now left to the rest of us, particularly United Nations, to see whether it can bring everybody together and begin to find a peaceful way of resolving this crisis, even to the extent of whether we have to break up a country like Syria, because as things are today, very few people can actually see a way out of Syria. Assad controls a very small place. The rebels have another place. The Kurds have, quite a number of places in that part of the world. So there's so much confusion in all this, which again, going back to your first thing, was created by the world powers themselves. Absolutely. So until we can find a way of everybody sitting down and finding a solution, we are probably going to have these attacks and reattacks continuing and no solution in place. And Assad will remain in power. Okay. Bear in mind that this is 7 years. We've been trying to remove him.
Yes, Ambassador Keshi, here are some of the issues going on. Russia, of course, in response to U.S. action, has also suspended the confliction zone. Is that what it's called? The zone where, of course, each party, for once, the other about the missiles. Now, that is there. U.S. has also not reneged on its resolve to, stand against ISIS rebels. So how might this action impact on the collaboration against ISIS?
No, look. When Russia got involved, it claimed it was there to fight ISIS. But Russia was actually bombing the opponents of Assad, whom the United States was supporting. In fact, at some point, we must put this, understand it. At some point, the United States, before President Obama left, stopped supporting or sending arms because they were not even sure who they were supporting. Today you're supporting one group. The next day you find out that that group is,
Well, Ambassador Keshi, you've made some point, but let's bring in again Dr. Samson Zeribe. Dr. Zeribe, you see, the more you will seek to evaluate what's happening around the world, particularly now, say, in the Middle East and North Korea and elsewhere, the question arises, are we also not seeing a failure of international institutions? And therefore, this crisis that we are seeing will linger for a long time. Look, the Arab League is silent. In the meantime, Syria is being reduced to rubble. Nobody hears about Yemen now, but Yemen, of course, is not on its feet. Look at what is happening in Libya. I mean, Libya is a failed state, practically, as we all know. Egypt is struggling, to be on its feet. Saudi Arabia, of course, is quiet. At some point, Saudi Arabia deploys its forces or its platforms, to hit against ISIS and so on and so forth. The EU is grappling with Brexit. NATO, of course, is contending with what Trump had said. So, if international institutions are failing, and the U.S., of course, is not the sole hegemon as we once knew it, what does this mean in terms of trying to think through what is going on and then profile a solution? Because the point has been articulated that, look, at some point there will be, a roundtable. But who is going to provide that? And before you do that, how much more will the world suffer and lose?
That's why I said at the beginning, it looks like a failure of U.S. hegemon in the world. The problem started when the Soviet Union collapsed. All the assurances Gorbachev extracted from the West jettisoned it. Immediately, Soviet Union collapsed because Gorbachev was carried away by the euphoria. Gobi, he was handsome and all those things. Gobi, he was dancing to it, not knowing this is politics, international politics. I could say he was naive. Now, you said at the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Warsaw Pact disbanded naturally.
That's right.
What should have followed was either disbandment of NATO or reorganize NATO to focus on other areas and not military build-up. One of the promises they made to Gorbachev was not to expand towards the east, which they have reneged. They are now at the doorstep of Russia.
Yeah.
And as Henry Kissinger said, he said that American diplomats lack the knowledge of history, that they keep on reading law. That international politics is not only about argument. You need to know history. That if their diplomats read history, they would have known better than to meddle in Ukraine. They should have kept away. So you bring your forces round about Russia and you want them to keep quiet. The Crimean issue, Crimea was originally a Russian territory given away by Khrushchev, who was the president then, the Soviet Union, though he's a native Ukrainian, gave it away. So anybody feeling that America will come into Ukraine become a NATO member, and then Russia watch them take their naval base, it won't happen. It will not. Russia will not do it. So that's why Russia said, okay, if you are entering into Ukraine, go ahead, but we take our naval base. Simple. That was international politics. Look at Syria. What is playing out? Russia wasn't involved in Syria ab initio, but when they saw what was happening and tried to analyze, I think the world at a stage will be grateful to Russia for intervening in Syria. Why? History has seen what happened in Iraq. You went into Iraq, you wanted a regime change, you got it. Where was the plan B of how to keep the place stable? Now the world is worse off. The same thing happened in Libya. You removed Gaddafi, there was no plan B. The whole place went up in chaos. And the ripple effect is going around the world. You have extremists moving into France, Britain, Belgium, Netherlands, everywhere. So Russia thought twice, if we allow this to happen again in Syria, the world will explode. And they went in. This thing could be settled politically, not a military.
Yeah, what platforms politically? That's the part of the question. What platforms? If the existing, if the existing international institutions are actually ineffectual.
That political platform can only bring Russia, US, Iran, that is already there, and the Arab nations round a table. If you remove Assad the way they want to remove him by force, as they did the two previous ones, it will be counterproductive. Whichever way they want to do it, Russia has said it is a political solution. If they ease Assad out politically, peacefully, and find a way to put somebody there It must be the Libyans and the Syrians themselves that elect somebody that will be there. If you come and impose, as the world has done in the 2 previous states, it will be counterproductive. UN can only be a moderator, because as far as the UN is concerned, when America wants anything, it gets it, whether with approval or not.
All right, let's pause it for a moment. Let's go over to Dr. Ewa, of course, joining us from Skype, via Skype. You've just listened to Dr. Nzeribe here, of course, and his opinion. But earlier on, Ambassador Joe Keshi did make a point about Donald Trump, probably beginning to take advice, from his ex-experts. But if that being the case, I'd like you to tell us what the voting Americans think about what his actions, have been, and what are they saying? In addition to whether or not the international platforms that moderate world peace have failed in their responsibilities or not. That was a question Kingsley put to Dr. Nzeribe.
Thank you very much. I think my other colleagues have been very, very articulate in pointing out the historical perspectives leading to all of these wars or confusion. My general point is this: America still remains a military-industrial complex, and they would like to continue being that, because for the past 8 years during the Obama administration, we did not do a lot in terms of selling arms to a lot of countries. And if you look at what has happened right now in the last 24 hours, folks who are what we call the war hawks in America have supported what Trump has just done in Syria. The right-wing populists have also supported that. The Democrats are mostly folks who supported Clinton and the resistance movement. Some of them have supported what the president has done. However, what they are looking for is a positive exit to that. The question is, what is the next phase? You have gone in to do this, then what? And as my other folks have indicated, until there is a very clear indication, a public policy initiative that tells us after bombing Iran or Iraq or whatever, this is the major thing that we have to do, it cannot be solved by force. It has to be by moral persuasion, bringing everybody on the table and hammering out exactly. There is something that we haven't talked about, and I don't think it's necessary, but I'll point it out. Look at what is going on in the Middle East as a whole. Israel is there. The Palestinians are there. We have not yet resolved their issue. We have Iraq and Iran. We have not yet resolved those issues, and as others have indicated, all of these things were caused by the United States. There is no exit right now, positively. And if you look at what we here in the United States are looking at, every person who has looked at the bombing of Iraq has said, okay, fine, if you have done that, now tell us what to do again. Bernie Sanders supported the bombing, but was very, very skeptical. The leftists, the anti-war machine, which are some of the progressives in this country, are now saying that, yes, please provide us evidence to show that, yes, it was Assad who brought the chemical weapons to that place, as one of our individuals have already said. Now you go back to the libertarians. All of these groups are standing behind the president, positively or negatively, relative to what their ideology is. I think it is based upon this that the president reversed most of his campaign promises relative to America First. I will support seriously what others have said, that until we are able to come up with a concerted effort that brings some of these parties back to the table, it will not be very, very possible to have peace in the Middle East. And if the President of the United States reverses his pronouncements, it will be a very, very good thing. Unfortunately, that is also going to lead to the expansion of NATO, which one of our discussions have already helped into. The question is, at what point would we convince Russia or even the United States to please forget their hegemony and say, for the sake of peace in this world, how do we come together? And until this is done, I don't think we're going to have peace. But I would say this, there will be no third world war because nobody wants to drop bombs or nuclear weapons on any other person. Look at Phnom Penh, China and Russia at the same time. It's impossible. But I would support the fact that nobody should be prepared to go to war unless moral persuasion is exhausted to bring all of these parties together. We in the United States, even if you turn on the television today, it is the same discussion that you are having, that we are having here. Where do we go from here, fellow Americans? Do we support Trump and go to war? No, nobody wants to do that. If the polls came out about maybe yesterday or so, only 16% of the folks say yes, there should be war. More than 60 to 75% say that we should not bring American folks boots on the ground, whether it is in Syria or anywhere. So these are the kinds of things that are actually making the president listen more carefully before taking action. I hope this continues.
Dr. Ewa, thanks a lot for your comments and then your optimism that, you know, there's been a report lately that President Trump ordered the launch of the missiles on Syria based on the advice from his daughter. So we do not know whether she belongs to the inner circle to be advising on the launch, you know, if you were to touch the nuclear code buttons. But that's one other issue. Now, as for the military contractors who are already jubilating, that's the same way they jubilated in 2003 when President Bush, the son, went into Iraq. And of course, the analysts here have indicated that the entry of the powers into Iraq, including, of course, Tony Blair, who ignored public opinion in the UK and then went into Iraq, and we are all seeing the consequences of what is unfolding. Now, let's take our reactions now from our viewers. Otega Isemwede says, the widening global conflicts are the result of greed and evil-minded persons because it benefits the arms sellers and the politicians.
He has a second one.
All right. It says the only way to tackle this is for people to continue to build bridges of understanding and tolerance and to do away with power greed.
Okay, there's one here coming from Oscar, and there is just Kingsley.
That's not supposed to be read.
Okay. All right, let's quickly go on now. Eze Chukube tweets, the widening global conflict. The world is a stage managed by some few people who lack conscience.
And then Sonny Michael Amakoji says that the global conflict is a concept encouraged by advanced nations which avail them the opportunity to sell their weapons.
And Tunde Emmanuel, global conflict will continue to deepen because of globalization, which is primarily about domination and access to global resources.
Festus Akimboyewa tweet says, sad that we are now living in a fragile world caused mainly by rich nations creating poverty in many nations through trade manipulation.
And Chris Simon tweets, conflict is inevitable, but we don't pray for Third World War.
Andoaka Veshiba has this tweet, joblessness is the main cause. It is the idle people that they use in conflict situations. Give the youth jobs.
All right, and Festus Akimboyewa tweets, there will always be conflicts in an unequal world where majority live in poverty and the wealth and opportunities are in the hands of a few.
Tunde Emmanuel, global crisis is as a result of the technology-based Cold War amongst the superpowers. Nigeria requires high-tech capacity to survive.
And again, Sani Michael Omakuji tweets from investigation. It has been uncovered that terrorism is financed by some of those nations aimed at advancing their cause.
Chris Simeon, UN leaders should come together, set up a platform by trying to resolve this antagonistic interaction between these conflicting nations. And
Mahmoud Haman tweets, the spate of conflicts in the world is due to the absence of honest and credible statesmen and abuse of the obsolete veto power by USA and Russia. And Kingsley talking about veto power.
Oh, right, of course. That's, yes, we saw what played out at the UN Security Council, 5 permanent members. Nigeria, of course, is being canvassed as a member to represent Africa, but still we have 5 permanent members, each of them at any point in time, depending on where their strategic interest lies, exercising the power of veto. But let's play this back and then you listen in on what went on in New York yesterday.
Staffan de Mistura, the UN envoy to Syria, holds regular monthly briefings at the Security Council on the situation there. But after last week's alleged chemical weapons attack and the US airstrike in response, this one was more highly charged than most.
Let us view this moment of crisis, and it is a moment of crisis, as a watershed and an opportunity perhaps for a new level of seriousness in the search for a political solution.
Mr. de Mistura urged the US and Russia to work together, and even as he was speaking, US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson was meeting his counterpart Sergei Lavrov in Moscow. But those talks weren't enough to prevent yet another display of gridlock at the Security Council in a vote on a resolution condemning the alleged chemical weapons attack.
With those in favor of the draft resolution, please raise their hand. Those against?
This resolution was brought by the so-called P3, the US, the UK and France, and it's the 4th draft resolution on Syria to come before the Council over the last week or so. But the wording just wasn't acceptable for Russia, as it called for an investigation into that alleged chemical attack in Syria. So the Kremlin cast its 8th veto on Syria in the last 6 years. Russia said the document prejudged who was responsible for the suspected gas attack.
The main problem was that the draft resolution by the Troika appointed the guilty party prior to an independent and objective investigation. This is an approach that is incompatible with legal norms.
China appeals to all relevant parties to adhere to the general intention of solving the Syrian issue through political solutions, the principle of the issue being owned and dominated by Syrian people. We also called on all to support the role of...
All right, now that's a report there. You see the acknowledgement to China Global Television News for that report on what transpired at the UN Security Council. Now let's expand the conversation and go back to General Temlong in our Jos Network Center. General Temlong, now let's reduce this to our own national strategic interests. As we said, you know, the conflicts are widening. Now, how do we as a country, you know, begin to make sense of what's going on in terms of global economic forecast and how this might impact in our plans or programs so that we are not caught napping, assuming, you know, things begin to give way?
Thank you very much, Kingsley. I think as a nation we must look at this thing in a strategic context. We were caught unawares, and I would say it was seriously because when the Arab Spring started, you found out that Nigeria was happy that Libya, having been a thorn in our flesh for many years, Gaddafi was going to be out. But there was no strategy put in place to see that if Gaddafi went off, what would be the domino effect of that on us? In the end, we found out that a lot of the Libyan arms got into the hands of Boko Haram. A lot of the Libyan fighters who went in to fight there got into the hands of Boko Haram. So we have a situation where we were happy that our arch enemy was going off, and yet we didn't prepare for what the ripple effect will be. The same thing with what is happening today. I think we should be even most concerned, not about a world war per se, But if these weapons of mass destruction falls into the hands of terrorists, and you know terrorism has no borders. Some years back, we were talking about suicide bombers in Lebanon, in Israel, and the rest. Today, you have young girls lacing themselves with explosives and blowing up places of worship and people all over the place. If these weapons of mass destruction get into the hands of terrorists, what will be the effect on Nigeria? We must look at this. We must look at the technologies available too, and if they are able to get part of these things, delivery means might not be a problem, but since they are able to blow themselves up, they can deliver this by, not through projectiles, no. They can blow them. Now, what about our economic interests in all these things too? Because somebody alluded to, the first law of survival is self-preservation. Nigeria must look at ways of preserving itself and expanding and increasing its elements of national power in a way that we should be able to play the role of a hegemon either in Africa or West Africa, so that we can leverage on our strength, on our population, on our God-endowed resources to be able to protect and project Nigeria positively. We cannot sit down and be expecting that people from outside will come and solve our problems. They will not. If we are able to build our coalition now and finding out that the multinational joint task force, since coming into place, have been able to create some leverage for us to prevent Boko Haram from moving freely from Cameroon, Chad, Niger into Nigeria, hit back and run back, that means that we need to have a strong base and a leadership role that we're able to harness the other African countries or African countries around us to be able to bring peace and stability in Africa, to bring economic growth and prosperity for our own sub-region. That will bring stability that is much needed in Africa. You find out that most African states cannot stand on their own, even when they have crisis. If Nigeria could hardly deal with Boko Haram as big as we are, then you can imagine those small African countries. Somalia today is a failed state. Libya is a failed state. Kenya is grappling with ISIS there. DR Congo. You can list them up. Somalia, Liberia would have been gone without Nigeria. Sierra Leone would have been gone without Nigeria. You can go on counting. And if we are not able to learn from these experiences and start building a nation and building our military and resources and national elements of power to be able to leverage on this and get Nigeria out of the wood first and then help other African countries, stability and prosperity will become a problem for us.
Right, Brigadier General John Temlong, thank you. We'll come back to you. Ambassador Joe Keshi, if the UN Security Council, could not, effect the resolution, and the G7 could not also sanction Russia, what are the options available now?
Well, I would have loved to react to what the general said, but let me go back to your question. I think at the end of the day, the Arab world need to sit down and decide what they want. We've not talked much about the effect or the role of religion in this conflict. And religion is also playing a big role, because of the competition, or I don't even know what the word to use, between the two major Muslim groups or Islamic groups, is it the Shias and the Sunnis? It is playing a big role in this crisis. And so I take the position that if the Arab world decide that they want peace today, they can actually achieve that peace by getting themselves together and talking, because at the end of the day, it is the Arab world that is being destroyed, not the United States and not Russia.
Not Russia.
So they have to decide whether they play down on religion, come to their senses and decide to save, to save their region. If they don't do that, we continue to have this crisis.
What might trigger this? What might trigger this reaction from?
No, at the end of the day, they have to decide on their own best interest. Because you see, look, there's been a prediction that even Saudi Arabia is under threat. No matter how much you try to destroy, ISIS. By the way, Al-Qaeda, which of course came also, part of it came from ISIS, it's again on the rise. So if these nations do not come together to address these seeming problems, they are just going to find out that the crisis will move from one country to, to the other. I mean, that's almost, certain. But with regards to this country, look, there's no military intelligence officer today that would tell me that they were surprised or they were caught unawares or this country was caught unawares with the inflow of arms and ammunition to Boko Haram and so on. Because we knew years ago that even the arms used in Liberia, Sierra Leone, and other parts of West Africa, that they were coming from Russia through Burkina Faso to Sierra Leone and Liberia. Besides that, I've always maintained that this is a country that fought a war, came out of the war, did not rebuild its military. We went to Sierra Leone, Liberia. We depended on import. In fact, some of us could argue that the war lasted so long in these countries because of the fact that when we needed critical arms and ammunition, we had to wait until we received them from the rest of the world. When are we going to develop our own capacity and capability? And as long as we remain an import-dependent nation, we are militarily weak. If tomorrow some of these nations decide they are not going to give us arms and ammunition, what do we do? We have DEFCON in Kaduna. It was built it started about the same time, maybe just, with that of Pakistan, Brazil, India. Today, these are nuclear powers. We are producing furniture in our own military, So we just got to be serious in building up our military capability. I've said this many times, that we need to begin to look at the future. We need a very strong and powerful military and mobile military. Not the size, but a military that can really defend this country. The fact that a bunch of ragtag people we see on television called Boko Haram could hold this nation to ransom for almost 5 or 6 or 7 years should trouble us in this country, that we do not really have a military that can protect this country if we have to fight 2 wars at the same time. Why? Because after the Civil War, we did not build up the military. After the various military expeditions we've had in a number of other countries, we did not see the necessity to build up our military and build up our intelligence. Because at the end of the day, it's an intelligence thing. How did Boko Haram expand to become a threat to this nation? And nobody saw it? I refuse to believe this. So it's a question of the fact that how do we begin to say, look, going into the future, we need to build our military, we need to improve our intelligence, because these are the 2 things that can maintain the security of this country.
Ambassador Joe Kashi, but thanks a lot for the perspective you just introduced with regard to upscaling our military capability. But the question as to why we failed to build our military after the Civil War, and then as well as peace enforcement and interventions in some West African countries, those issues could be explained by the fact that we were under military rule, and one of the cardinal objectives of military rule had to do with regime protection and survival. You saw what happened in 1985 after the abortive coup against the regime of General Ibrahim Babangida. The Air Force lost its wings. It's only in recent times that the Air Force has started to gain its wings back, and it's also proceeding ahead with some research and all other points. But the point you made earlier is noted. But Dr. Samson Zeribe, let's again bring in the economic perspective. If, Ambassador Kashi mentioned that, look, if the Arab nations are unable to resolve this, and then you are seeing the resurgence of Al-Qaeda, some other elements of ISIS, seeking to destabilize the Middle Eastern region with their plenitude of oil and so on and so forth, how will that, together with the other conflict zones that we have touched on in the world, affect our own strategic thinking as a nation, and then our own planning in response to all of this? Because don't forget, each time we talk about our plans and programs, we always talk about events occurring on the international plane. are we well suited, to make these projections?
Well, if you mentioned economically, how do we move forward as a nation? If the crisis is, you see, in international politics, you have to play your game. We are here saying how to douse the tension internationally. But then, where it could not be doused and this tension erupts again, engulfing that Middle East, that's where most of the oil comes from. We're aware of that. Yes, it will be to our own benefit. The prices of oil will go up. It will be to our own benefit. But then, what have we done with the benefits we've had previously? We've done nothing with it. So, I would rather feel that the world is a safer place for everybody, and then we channel our economic development through other sources, rather than depending on conflicts somewhere else for our leaders to think. Coming to the arms issue, and there's no doubt now, the military-industrial complex in the U.S., let me use the U.S. in particular now, is the driving force behind any U.S. government. Anybody that doesn't recognize that is just dancing in the air. Don't forget, Dick Cheney was vice president, and he was a top-notch in Halliburton, a military-industrial company. So what they do is that every crisis that is brewing, it is either they brew that conflict, establish it, and let it escalate.
Yeah, but that's Dr. Nzeribe, that's part of, let's just assume they're pursuing their own interests as military contractors. And
yes.
My question is, for us as a country, Nigeria, watching these global events, including what's happening in the EU,
yes.
If you watch the UK is reaching out to Saudi Arabia, reaching out to China, reaching out to India on account of what they perceive to be their potential losses from
yes.
Brexit. So how do we respond to all of this? Are we going to be sitting ducks? Do we now begin to think and say, look, let's watch and then let's see how we respond so that we can factor that into our planning?
Yes.
Dr. Nzeribe or Dr. Ambassador
Yes, that's equally the problem. That's where leadership comes in. Now, if we say, because these things that we are talking of, what is happening now and in the near future, are we saying, okay, let's go and beef up our military-industrial complex, which we've lost? We could have done that immediately after the Civil War. But because of those that were at the helm of affairs, ethnicity played in. Oh, these people produce so much, they were able to sustain this one on their own. If we go and encourage them now, they will take the credit that is coming from there. That's just why the military did not bother to develop what we had during the Civil War. But it's not late. They can still go back to the drawing board and start doing something. This country could have been a major arms exporter, at least to the near abroad, the African nations. So, I was listening and I watch. That's international relations is what I do. When I hear Nigeria aspiring to be a member of the Security Council, I sit back and laugh. I laugh. I said that you want to just be a local champion. Look at the people sitting in the UN Security Council and try to compare yourself to them. I couldn't compare Nigeria.
Ambassador Keshi is being in New York, by the way. So
yes. Look at,
it's being in New York.
Yes,
so
yes. Look at Russia.
But of course, yes.
Look at Russia, yes. China, America, France, Great Britain. The 5 permanent members. Now, you put Nigeria that cannot just solve its economic problem, could not handle Boko Haram on its own. You want to go and sit at the UN Security
Ambassador
Council.
Keshi has been an advocate. Ambassador Keshi has been an advocate of...
I don't want them to be there. Nigeria shouldn't be there. We have problems home that we should solve first before going to be there.
There's something wrong in having aspirations.
Okay, thank you. I agree with you.
There's something wrong in having aspirations.
Right,
but Kingsley,
yes.
Sorry, before you go, look, on this economic issue, there are quite a number of things that is worrisome. we are going to China to get some loans. Chinese are going to America to invest. I don't know whether you get the, massively. As you rightly pointed out, the current British government, following their decision to leave Europe, are going to China and attracting investors. They're going to Australia, all over the world, to attract investors and so on. What does that tell us? Very simple. That except we make our own environment conducive for investors to come, it will be very difficult for investors to come in. My hope is that the new document, economic document, that has just been put in place, and we're waiting for more details, as the Minister of National Planning has said that they would come out with the implementation strategies, that this would actually open up the economy so that we don't go around the world looking for loans, but be able to attract investors who will bring their money to invest in this country. Because at the end of the day, this country is attractive for investors when you look at quite a number of things. You have the population, you have the market, and the rest. But we still need to do quite a couple of things in order to attract investors rather than going for loans from everywhere in the world.
All right, that's Ambassador Joe Keshi, former Permanent Secretary, Minister of Foreign Affairs. We'd like to thank you for your insight always in our discussion this morning. And then we also would like to thank Dr. Samson Nzeribe of Bayes University. Dr. Nzeribe, thanks for being here today. And also going to Dr. Ewa, who joined us via Skype from the U.S. We'd like to thank you for being part of our discussion.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, and Brigadier General John Temlong, always a delight today. You were at our Jos Network Center. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you very much, Kingsley, and I'm glad you can comment more on military issues now than before. Great.
All right, well, that does it for our discussion segment of Good Morning Nigeria. We'll take a short break now.
So what's up, sweetheart? You really look like you're up to something.
I have a secret.
Okay.
I'll be going to Europe next week.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Like you have your visa, your passport, your plane ticket?
No, not that way. Some men are helping us. We pay them, they take us through the desert, and then we cross the sea into Europe.
The desert, the sea. Isn't that the route where many have died?
Yes, it is indeed a very dangerous journey. In 2016 alone, 4,900 people died while crossing the Mediterranean Sea to enter Europe. Many were Nigerians. For the very few who survived the journey, they are forced into prostitution or other crimes just to survive. Eventually, they will be arrested and deported to Nigeria. Don't be a victim. Don't go this way.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
NTA Television College Jos, an affiliate of Ahmadu Bello University Zaria, has maintained her reputation of putting together courses that are highly relevant to manpower needs of the broadcast industry. The college has put together 3 core courses for 4 weeks on computer networking for television for the engineers in the broadcast industry. Date 17th April to 12th May 2017. Registration fee 80,000 naira with accommodation. Also, a 4 weeks course on English grammar and pronunciation for broadcasters, presenters, scriptwriters, news editors, journalists, and master compares. Date 22nd May to 16th June 2017. Registration fee 80,000 naira with accommodation. TV College also has a 4 weeks course on specialized reporting to cater for those that want to learn the skills of reporting from judiciary, crime, conflict zones, environment, business, natural disasters, politics, and health. The course will teach you the ways to write and handle stories with peculiar situations. Registration fee 80,000 naira with accommodation. Date 19th June to 14th July 2017. Venue of all courses will take place at NTA Television College, Rayfield, Jos. For more inquiries, contact us on 0806 980 9807 0703 660 7155 or email us at ntacollege@gmail.com. NTA Television College, Jos, training you to be the best you can be.
You wouldn't believe what I'm going through here. It's all men talking about sports. All right, let's get the real sports news now. And Real Madrid of Spain and Monaco of France win away from home in the first leg of UEFA Champions League quarter-final.
Yeah, Victor Azul for the sports package. Now we go on to the foreign scene. And there are stories about Iran's former President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who's registered for next month's presidential election. Plus, Russian President Vladimir Putin says the U.S.-Russia trust has deteriorated under the Trump presidency. Here's Oyemi Ajayi with details of the stories.
All right, thank you and welcome to another time to talk about events around the world as they unfold. In a surprise move, Iran's former president Mahmoud Ahmadinejad has registered as a candidate for next month's presidential election. Ahmadinejad had previously said he would not stand after being advised Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, saying he would instead support his former deputy Ahmed. He said he remained committed to his moral promise to Khamenei of not running for the May 19 election. Khamenei's advice was not a ban at the Interior Ministry where registration was taking place. Ahmadinejad left office in August 2013 after 2 turbulent 4-year terms, leaving the country divided domestically, isolated internationally, and struggling economically. In 1999, Ahmadinejad's re-election was followed by one of the largest protests to hit the country since the Islamic Revolution 3 decades before. And now Russian President Vladimir Putin said the trust between Washington and Moscow has deteriorated since Donald Trump was elected U.S. president, as the Kremlin dismissed U.S. calls to abandon Syrian President Bashar al-Assad as short-sighted and absurd. The comments came as Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov called the Trump administration to clarify its policies as he opened a fraught with his American counterpart Rex Tillerson. Putin doubled down on Russia's support for Assad, repeating denials that Syria's government was to blame for a suspected gas attack last week on a rebel-held town, adding that it may have been faked by Assad's enemies. And that's it on the foreign scene. Bye for now.
All right, we'll move on now to arts and entertainment. And Gufan Shanji tells us about the drum, a particular drum of Africa as it relates to modern technology.
Hello and welcome to Arts and Entertainment. Though Manuel is a man of art, for over 20 years, he has played a leading role in building bridges between Africa and the Western world in arts and culture. In a major drive to continue on the same vein, he now has a new project. He calls it Do You Speak Djembe? The project brings together practitioners in Africa and international music scene to review what is happening to the iconic African drum, the djembe. Djembe is believed to contain spirits from the tree from which it was made, spirits of the animal whose skin is played, and the spirit of the carver, as well as the spirit of the ancestors. The djembe drums of Africa were used to communicate, gather people together, and used to enhance aspects of daily life. But over the years, technology has taken over such practices, illustrating how technology enhances humanity using the djembe drums. Though Manuel, however, stresses that technology has taken away the connect an African man feels from the rhythm that resonates from the djembe.
So most of it.
All right, that was Gufan Shanji telling us all about the djembe drums of Africa. Now, a quick look at the weather forecast for the rest of today.
It's good to have you join us on today's weather segment. I am Joyce Ogunleye. Presently, there is a weather system over Central African Republic, which is expected to hit the eastern half of the country by Wednesday evening. And this may linger into Thursday morning, affecting areas around Mambila, Yola, parts of Enugu, Ikom, and the coastal belt. And as the day progresses, we expect these weather activities to shift westwards with prospects of thunderstorms affecting parts of Kebbi, Kano, Zaria, some parts of the central state, the high ground areas of the southwest, and the coastal belt. We still expect further reductions in temperatures. Do have a great day.
All right, thank you very much there, Joyce Ogunleye, for the weather report. Good morning, Nigeria, and that also does it for today's edition of the program. Thank you for being with us. We're back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock. My name is Kingsley.
And I'm Claire Adelabo Abdul Razak. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget, tomorrow is a public holiday, but of course, Good Morning Nigeria will be back on your screens. We'll see you then.